Welcome to the No Rest for the Vivid podcast. My name is Claire Hill, self-belief coach and business coach, founder of the Vivid Business Club. Before I have my guest introduce himself, I would love to can you go and check that you follow and subscribe to the podcast, whether you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, YouTube, just go and check, because that is like giving me a high five saying that you love it, and it does wonders for the podcast reach and reaching new people to help them. Hello, Gareth.
Hello, how are you doing, Claire?
I'm good. Hello, Gareth. Gareth is one of my clients, and he is here today to chat to us. I'm excited about this conversation, Gareth. For those people who don't know who you are, because actually a lot of my audience is not in your world, so this is going to be an education. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, where you come from, and all that jazz.
Right, so I am, I suppose I'm curious as how I interact with the world. I want to find out what's going on. I'm a continual learner, a lifelong learner, and I'm a curiosity as well. So by that, I mean, I've got a really diverse background. I spent 25 years in the Royal Air Force as flight crew, as a trials officer, systems engineer, procurement, requirements manager, lots of different roles, from frontline operator to strategic decision maker. And then in February 15, I decided to leave, set up my own business, teaching high-risk industries, something called crew resource management, how to create a shared mental model within a team. And that comes from the aviation space. Started in oil and gas, started a bit doing work in healthcare and software, but my passion has always been about diving, trying to bring this stuff into the diving space. So I formed the Human Diver, and I've run that since pretty much January 16, developed some instructors across the world, written a whole bunch of training programs, written a book, put a documentary together, put a second master's degree together. And then it's like, right, what do I do now? And that's where Claire came in.
And I just got you to rewrite everything. No,
Exactly. And so
everything.
a lot of this, and I'm sure the conversations this morning will go on that, is my identity has often been about the diving space, and that's where I'm comfortable, but it doesn't make as much money and it doesn't give as much reach as I'd really want to do. My passion is about being in front of people and sharing stories, sharing experiences, sharing knowledge. I mean, Monday just gone, I was in front of 350 people at the Global Electrical Safety Conference. I know nothing about electrical safety other than people are involved. And it was quite interesting there because they're all engineers, they're all technicians, and they want to design everything out. But people, they're difficult, they're different, and they don't behave the same way as machines do. And so that gave me a real buzz, no pun intended, because actually people were recognizing, you know what, we've got to look at things differently. We can't make things perfect. And so over the last probably 3 to 6 months, I've been growing Human in the System, which is the non-diving side of what I do. And ultimately, people are people. It's just the stories that change. And I know you know that from the work you do, Claire, with working with people from all sorts of different spaces. So yeah, I'm curious. I'm a curiosity. So hopefully that sort of gets people going.
Now they're curious about why you're a curiosity, aren't they? They're like, what's going on here? What's he using these words for? We don't know. No, jokes. But I love but you are, when we first met, which is coming up to a year-ish ago,
Yeah.
coming up like 9 months, 10 months. And in that time, like when we first met, it was, so how many qualifications have you got, Gareth?
Uh,
Uh,
yeah. Enough. And
Definitely
so I've already
my
got one.
arms are not long enough for your
Yeah,
qualifications.
absolutely. And so I think that's one of my bits about, being a continual learner
Yeah.
is having a diversity of experiences. So being aircrew, being a systems engineer, having 2 master's degrees, writing a book, talking to lots of people in lots of industries, actually it gives you a different perspective. And that's where my sort of real, I suppose, strength is being a positive provocateur. So asking difficult questions, getting a mirror held up in front of people, and then finding the answers with the discussions that I have. And I love it because every class is different, every engagement is different.
Mm.
because everybody themselves is different and their experiences, how they make sense of the world is all very different.
What is your favorite really difficult question to ask somebody? Have you got any up your sleeve?
No, so there isn't a favorite one. There's that they come up, and it's like the easiest question to ask, and it can be the most uncomfortable, is how did it make sense for you to do that? And the reason why it's difficult is because it forces people to look inside and understand their own decision-making process. And it's like a bit of an onion that the more you peel it, you take another layer off and you go,
Mm,
oh, and then you open it up and you open it up. And so it's about not just the one question, that's a great opening question, but the same as you do for your coaching, that's a starter question for 10,
mm.
right? Where do we go next? And the conversations emerge. They are just like the real world. They go in all sorts of different directions. And by the end of 2 days, which is the sort of normal training program length that I deliver, I'm not too tired, but the students in the class are normally pretty exhausted, emotionally exhausted, because there's a lot of stuff goes on. And they start to understand, oh, there's a lot more to it than this, that it's very easy to go, oh, they were stupid, they didn't pay attention, there was miscommunication, there was human error. When
Mm.
actually they start looking at the context and the design of the systems they're in. So when we use the computer-based simulations, it's a really rubbish interface, but it lulls people into making decisions a certain way. And they've never really considered why and how they make the decisions they do. So yeah, it's those emergent conversations that are really, really interesting.
When you are discussing human error, and obviously been you've been in the diving space for a very long time, and we've had big discussions about that. Not that it's, what serves you best and how you can help the most people, but when you are in front of people and you're talking about a human error, how easy is it for people to share human error? That something, obviously there's some errors that are obviously in the industries you work with that are so blatant that it's like, well, obviously that's quite obvious. But
Yeah.
there, as you started working with other organizations, and there's a few that you worked with recently, how do you get them to recognize that it's human error and own up to it without feeling safe enough to do that?
So start off with just the language that you use there. I'd like you to own up to an error you've made, Claire. What's the likelihood of you doing that?
Oh, I
It's
do it
like,
all the time. Oh, I do
well,
it. Yeah,
yeah, but how
that's what
you
I'm
frame
saying.
it.
Yeah, how you frame it, because I think it comes from a place. If somebody can go, oh, hands up, I've made a right boo-boo here, that comes from a place of, I know that I am not inferior or inadequate because I've made a mistake.
Yeah.
But how do you get people in that room to be able to do that? And I'm not suggesting you like, hands up, everybody. Who's
No,
made a
absolutely
boo-boo?
not.
Yeah, no.
And so what I do is, that fear, and that's what my research was about, is what are the factors that prevent people from telling those stories? And often there's professional jeopardy involved. So the first bit is change the language. I'd like, who's got an error that they're going to admit to? Tell me something that didn't go to plan. So
Mm,
so immediately I'm changing it. Admit has got a negative connotation,
yeah.
and understand that accidents, incidents happen as deviations from normal and not from following the rules. Now, rules and normal might be the same thing, but in most places they're not. So I ask the question, what does normal look like? And so you discuss what a normal day might be, and it might be a bunch of time pressures, it might be a poor interface that people are dealing with. And then we say, okay, so what was different on this day? And one of the easiest ways to get people to talk about them is talk about these errors. And you can only reclass an error after the event, because if we knew we would make an error, we wouldn't do it. So we can only really classify afterwards. Is we take it to something like where there's no professional jeopardy. So you walk out the front door and the door goes click and you go, oh, keys are in the house.
Mm,
And so that's about forgetting. So explaining to people that if you forget something, you're not going to remember it until there is a prompt. Now that in that case is the door goes click. Subconsciously, my brain goes door, lock, click. Oh, I need keys. I
mm,
don't have them. It's like when you go shopping or you've got a task to do, I'm talking about low jeopardy situations, and I get people to understand their performance variability, human error,
Mm,
in a non-jeopardy situation, and then say, right, do you understand how you make decisions, how you make sense of the world in a non-jeopardy situation? Yep, right, they get that. Right, let's move into the workspace now. So now you're working really busy, you've got time pressures you've got to deal with, you've got a whole bunch of emails that come through, they list, they get stuck in that list, you forget something. Oh yeah, well, I shouldn't have done. Well, you shouldn't have forgotten the keys when you walk out the front door either, but you
mm.
do. So the idea here is to break down that barrier of fear, to basically say normalizing that variability in performance. And then we can start sharing that. And the most powerful way I do it, I start telling stories at the start of the class. And I'll say, here is something that went wrong recently, and here is the context, and here are the reasons. Set the example, create psychological safety straight away.
Sharing vulnerability, some of the work that I've done with you is about being more vulnerable and sharing your stories, because that it's a very powerful way. Like, you will do it in a classroom, or say a classroom, but in a workshop
Yeah.
without thinking, and it's quite normal. And we've had those discussions where you've worked with people and they're like, you've literally changed the way I see myself, I see the world. But you outside of that space, not as vulnerable. Remember
Mhm.
that, like, how have you got your, and you're doing a really good job now. I'm not saying, like, you
No,
are
no, no, it's
showing
good.
loads more in that vulnerability space. But how did you feel about doing that when we started that process with you, and the impact it's had on who you're working with?
It's hard, definitely. There's no doubt about it, because society, especially across social media, which is where a lot of people make contacts, is
Mm.
we have this, hey, look, everything's a success. No, it's not. It sucks a lot of the time. And we can make our successes, but it's also telling people that it's okay not to have a successful outcome from something. And I posted something the last couple of days about an experiment that I run using an AI large language model like ChatGPT. And I've run this for about 6 months. It's probably cost me two and a half grand to see whether or not this product would take. And the idea was that I would load up a whole bunch of my materials, blogs, podcasts, and everything, and then people would use it as a reference tool. Nobody did. And I think part of that is it's not either trustworthy, people don't see the value in it. People also don't see the nuances in the language that I use about learning compared to a normal language that comes out of ChatGPT, because that's all they know. So you sit there and go, why would I either, even if it was free, people don't use it because there's an opportunity cost involved. So I just turned around and went, hey, here we go. Here's an experiment. You lot can learn from this as well. So it's about getting out there and saying, you know what, we make mistakes, and we're always on this learning journey. And the feedback that I've had has been really positive, actually. And I think it's like, we need more of those stories. Go on then, come on, you can do this too. But the sort of role modeling is really important. And I think the 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 social media is an interesting one, because you can almost hide behind it. Whereas actually vulnerability face to face is way more powerful. It's much a smaller group. And I think it's powerful because it's in somebody's face. Social media is a difficult one because you don't get to control where it goes, or actually even if it's visible, um, because the algorithm determines how it's placed in front of other people. So I think the algorithm often looks at success stories or certain keywords, and I'm not sure that vulnerability and learning from failure makes it out there, because it doesn't sell as such, and that's ultimately what social media is about.
I'm going to slightly disagree with you. I
Go for
love it when we disagree.
it.
But no, I think it's about the emotive side of it, but also how you resonate with someone. I did a podcast episode that came out last week from when we're recording now,
Mhm.
and it was a really very personal episode. I was very vulnerable through it. and it was inspired by a friend of mine, um, who, one of my best friends in the whole world, and her from what she was going through, and we had a similar childhood. So I supported her, and I thought I've got to make a whole episode out of this because of the impact on self-worth, of
Yeah.
how chaos can create like when you're growing up, can create lots of difficulties in how you see yourself as you grow up.
Mm.
So I did a whole podcast episode on it. Um, I don't know if I've done much social media stuff with it, but I have spoken about it on Instagram.
Mhm.
Probably could do with a bit of an article on LinkedIn. Like I said, different worlds on these different
Yeah.
social media platforms, isn't it? But the amount of feedback that I've got, not because of anything like, I mean, I think I got a little bit choked up on the episode, which I don't like to do anymore, but it's
Right.
emotional. Well, it's because I, th I think it is. I want to make sure I'm talking from a place that where it's a scar, not a scab, and it definitely is
Okay.
now. So, but I was just thinking of my friend when I was getting choked up. Anyway, the feedback I've got has
Mhm.
been incredible, not from the fact that it's, oh, it's upsetting, but like a couple of people have said, you've hit the nail on the head. That's
Mhm.
exactly what happened to me. And I think that is when really amazing stories can be told, when somebody goes, oh, she knows my life.
Yeah.
I've got a message even yesterday about it, even though it was last week, saying you have hit the nail on the head, like that. You are talking like it was my childhood, how I feel about the world, how I've seen myself, how I want to control everything because I didn't have that control when I was younger. And I think there's a lot of people that, those kinds of stories where you go, oh, I'm not messed up.
Not alone. Yeah.
I'm not alone. I'm not messed up. There's nothing wrong with me, actually. This is actually just the way it is. And we can grow around it and move through it. But I think that kind of social media content does
Yes.
really well because actually you're talking about something that people hide. And
Mhm.
what you're doing is going, I'm not going to. And again, this is where your work is so important in the industries you work in. And, diving industry, we've got our issues with it, haven't we? But, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff where people are hiding these issues. And
Oh,
as
yeah.
a result, there's a cost. And then there's a cost to the cost, isn't there? It's like a ripple effect of how it moves through. But that's what you do in a workshop.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And I think your bit about social media is really interesting because I have sort of segregated where I communicate to different areas. So in the diving space, it's predominantly Facebook. So I've got a group with about 11,500 people in it and contribute in there and post in some other groups as well. LinkedIn is very much about the professional space
Mm,
and the sort of safety, human factors. And some of my diving stuff goes in there because people can relate. There's a lot of people who dive as a hobby, but they're professionals in high risk industry. So they can see the parallels and they
mm,
can draw that out from diving into their own space. Twitter is interesting, is where a lot of the healthcare space is. I don't have enough time or capacity to run another social media channel for Instagram. And I don't know if my client base would be there. I don't know. Maybe that's an experiment I need to run. But it's being very clear on what the messaging is. And your business is very much about getting people to recognize that. And, the personal contact that happens. We found out each other. I found out about you because of Becky, who's a friend of mine. So what I find is it's word of mouth that has the greatest impact, as with any, because it's about personal relationships and building those.
I'm
Uh,
really interested. I'm gonna just do a little side step now. Really interesting. Had you had a coach before you hired me?
I'd had somebody, but they were operating in a very different space to where I was. Now, they were ex-military, so we had an affinity there. I understood where they were coming from, but they were used to operating at the sort of the executive, big money executive level, and there wasn't a connection the same way that we had in terms of coaching.
Mm,
And it was oh, is this what it is? And then actually my experience with you was very different.
mm. I'll
Um,
call you
and
out.
Yeah, well, no, but it's, yeah, call me out. That's cool. I'm happy with that. And I think it's also recognizing being at a small business level rather than a corporate executive level. That yes, I can have those sort of visions, and that's certainly helped me grow with you. But I needed a stepping stone, and that's been where we are. And
Yeah. One thing that I want to we're working on, which I think I have told you, but this is we're going to be working on, is what legacy are you creating? Because we had a conversation when we had your VIP day. It's like, so where are you going to be in 10 years? And you were like, I've no idea. You said something a bit more negative than that. And I was like, oh, hold on a minute. No, what are we doing then? You haven't, I think it's getting better for you, but you didn't have your nav sat on a destination of like, what's the point? What's the point of all of this, Gareth? And I think you're working quite hard. So if I was going to ask you that now, what's the point? Where are you going with it all?
where am I going now? So I am. It's been I'm going outside my comfort zone, absolutely.
Yes.
And it's not being afraid. So I like small groups, working there, the intimate groups that I deal with in classrooms. But there's a limit to how much change can be created in a classroom of, say, 10, 12 people,
Mm,
compared to standing up in front of 350, 500 people and giving a talk and a presentation. And the feedback that I had after Monday, where I had somebody I was chatting to one of my co-presenters at the social drinks afterwards, and I noticed there was a lady standing next to me, and it's that bit of open the sea, Tom Geraghty from psychologicalsafety.com, he talks about the Pac-Man, that actually you've got to open the circle to let somebody in, because it's very
mm,
easy in it. And so it was like, okay. And she went, that was a really inspirational talk. I really got it. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And it's just when you are so passionate about something, you believe so much about it, you don't realize how much of an impact you can have on others. And I think that's been one of the eye openers is, yes, I'm having an impact in the diving space, but I have an impact much wider than that. When people drop me a message on LinkedIn or you get some feedback, and I think that's one of the hardest bits for the space that I operate in. There's a lot of transmit. There's not a lot. When you get your messages from, you were talking about Instagram, you get that personal contact, you go,
mm,
yes, I made a difference to that person. That's to me is the hardest piece about the work that I do and we do, is actually getting some recognition that we are making a difference, because that's what drives me, drives you, is you sit
mm.
there and go, when complete strangers, well, or contacts of mine will have somebody come up to them and say, you sound just like Gareth Locke does.
Ah, that's cool.
And that's just like, yeah, it is, because you realize that I'm. So what's interesting, you can't see my screen at the moment, which is my new Human in the System website, and the landing page has got a picture of a puddle with lots of little raindrops in it, because it's about the ripples that go out and create change further. So actually, it's quite timely here, and I think that's the bit that I love, is creating change at second order and third order levels that actually we just don't know the changes we're making. It'd be nice to know, because that's what drives and motivates me. Although I am self-worthy, thank you. I know what I do, and sort of journaling, and we might end up coming onto that. But absolutely, is writing those positive affirmations every day to say, I am worthy, I create change, I am changing the world in a positive way. And I think in the last probably 3 to 6 months, my sort of view of myself and view of the world has changed markedly. And it's picking up gigs that you sit and go, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And people now starting to contact me, and it's sort of dots connecting. So yeah, it's really cool to start growing and creating much bigger change. And the hard piece for me, I think, has been this bit about the sort of relationship with money, that I can't do this. I can't make lots of money because that's not ethical. It's like rubbish. you can't create change without money. And it's as long as you're making that money in an ethical way, that's fine.
Mm,
I certainly wouldn't abuse the system when it comes to selling stuff. It's why I limit the number of trainers I have, because I don't want to sell stuff where they can't market it because the market's not big enough. That's disingenuous. And it's also having the confidence to say, right, I am worth X amount on a day, put a proposal in, you get it or you don't. You don't get it, right? I know what the limit is with that company, and you move on.
mm,
So that's been an interesting sort of journey as well, is don't disvalue or devalue my work in a monetary sense, especially if I'm going to be reaching out to lots of people.
mm. I think I would love for you to talk about the change where you said, your identity is how you see yourself has changed over the
Mm,
last few months. But it is really interesting about and before we do that, we'll just talk about the money because when you were focused just on the diving industry, there was much more limit to the pot
mm,
of what they were willing to pay. And I think because they were not they aren't ready. I'll be very surprised if anyone in the diving industry is going to listen to this podcast. The only diver I know is my friend Shama, and she's PADI certified and she loves diving. But I think that's the only diver we're going to have on this.
Well, there's going to be a lot more because I'm going to share this when it goes
Oh,
live. So,
no offense to anybody in the diving industry before I say the next bit, but just not ready for the change that you've got. And
yeah,
I find that like some people will want to be around me and will want to get the energy and the momentum and the enthusiasm I have for them. Usually, when I meet people, I always see bigger things and stuff. People feel like they can get that through osmosis. So
yeah,
literally not paying me a penny. Now I don't care about that because otherwise I wouldn't have a podcast, I wouldn't have free
yeah,
content. You don't have to pay me for the money, pay me for that education. And if people listened to every single piece of content I did, every podcast episode, and they implemented everything that I said, they'd be having a lovely life. But no one
yeah,
has enough self-control or discipline really to have that. They've got to put their skin in the game. And
yeah,
that's, I think, the key with the diving industry for you, clients that I work come across, if you're not willing to pay, you're not willing to
yes,
be ready. You're not
yeah,
willing to change. And I think for the diving industry, and again, this is my limited opinion. So again, I'm not going to apologize for anyone in the diving industry, but it's just too comfortable for them right now to carry on as they are because of the way that they make their money
yeah,
by selling, this course, that course, etc., in different places. But you are also now in a world where people, and this is what I've supported you to do, is looking beyond the diving industry. And I'd love to a little bit of what work we had to do to get you looking outside of the diving industry in a minute. But that looking outside and saying that your message and your ability and your talent should not just be for the diving industry. And you can then go and work with big organizations. Shall we name drop a couple?
well, could do. So, yeah, I did, well, the sort of UK Ministry of Defence, New Zealand Defence Force, Technique Defence,
Canada.
Canadian military. I've done some demos with Netflix
Okay.
and
That's the one I
with
wanted to say, and I was like, am I allowed to say it? What about the other one? The
some Mercedes AMG as well. So I've got a scoping conversation in 3 weeks' time. So I did a demo. They were impressed, and we just got to work out what's happening next.
these organizations are big deals with multiple I think with Netflix for me it's like they decide what a lot of people watch.
Yeah.
So I mean the ripple effect, the potential there is massive. But yeah, I just limiting ourselves with people and also another piece of work that we did. So I'm jumping all over the place. I hope you've got the thread to this.
Oh, yeah. This is what life is about. It's not
Yeah,
linear. It's complex.
no.
It emerges. So that's why I love conversations.
But that the like you moving outside of the why you are holding on to the diving industry for so long is why, like, sometimes I will really want to work with somebody or I want them in, like I want to work with them. They are up there. I'm just gonna I don't want to pay you any money because, you know, I'm a cheapskate. Fine. And just a note to that, with no offense taken, if you're a cheapskate with your business, you're not serious about it enough.
Yeah.
Fact, you've got to invest. But those people, I used to get really hung up with them, hung up like, oh, why can't they see how I can change their life? And I do that. And the same as you in your profession, but I have moved past that and I don't give them a second thought now, unfortunately. Like I'm not going to beg for you to work with me because if you got to do the work, as you know,
Yeah.
like you've got to do the work. Can you like that thought, those identity changes that you had to go through to say, okay, I'll keep my foot in the diving industry, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to be full kit snorkel down there anymore. What can you like? Why were you holding
Yeah.
on to it as
So I
ferociously as you
think
were?
I think part of it is uh, uh, I've been accused of being arrogant in the past, and there might be something in that of I know something that you need to know to be safer, be better. And some of that is being validated by people who come on the programs and they say, look, this is the stuff that we need to have in the training materials. And, chasing after the training organizations. And I think, with me completing the masters and the coaching sessions with you, is the recognition that the diving system, there's no incentive for the training organizations to change. In effect, they are book producers, they're publishers of training
Mm,
materials. And they're not really interested in, and I get a bunch of grief for this because I say they're not really interested in what happens in diving safety. And they go, yes, we are. So if you were, you would do something about it. Ah, but we've got commercial drivers that limit what we can do. Okay, fine. That becomes an education piece. And I think it's that bit of people would come to me and say, if you don't do it, nobody else will.
mm,
And so there was a bit of sort of being held to hostage.
mm,
And I think there's also that self-confidence piece that because I've been immersed in the diving industry for so long, that it's my comfort zone. And I know, I am very knowledgeable in the space that I am. Moving into the non-diving space, I don't know people, but
mm,
actually it doesn't matter. It's that bit of putting myself out there and talking. And as I said right at the start, people are people. It's just the stories that change. And the good thing is that divers, as sort of touched on earlier as well, divers, very few of them are full time. So they work in high risk industries a lot of the time. So they then bring work opportunities that way as well.
mm,
So, I mean, in a month's time, I'm doing some work with a medical data processing company, a half-day workshop, because their safety lead is a diver and they know me because of diving. And they go, we need some of that in our own business. So there are some advantages to having a parallel space, but it certainly isn't, it doesn't generate enough revenue for me to be, I'm going to say, comfortable. So I have a business and not a job. And, there's that classic
mm,
piece of, as an entrepreneur, could you step away and let your business run on its own? No, right. You've got a job. You don't have a business. And I think I've also been sort of diversifying in passive income, in using other people to generate messages on my behalf as ambassadors or other trainers, because I can't scale to the level of change that I want. And so now I'm spreading into the non-diving space, and I've got 3 or 4 instructors who can deliver my materials with me in the non-diving space if we need to scale. But it's very much a personal interaction, rather than, and that can be, that personal interaction can be standing on stage in front of 500 people, or it could be in a workshop with half a dozen or a dozen senior managers within a business, but it's about making it personal to them. And I think one of the things you said to me is you could talk for half an hour and somebody might take a sentence away and that's it.
mm,
And that certainly happened on Monday. So we will see where that goes.
Yeah.
And it's finding one of the things that actually, I need to do more of is finding where these opportunities are. So speaking opportunities, I know there's some
Mm.
websites that are out there, but it's there are loads of conferences happen all the time, and they want different speakers. And without blowing my trumpet too much, there was some very technically orientated presentations that happen. There's an electrical safety conference with arc flash and preventing fatalities. And you listen to some of these presentations, go, oh my God, is anybody actually paying attention to this? And they're reading off their slides or they're looking up behind them. And when they look up, the microphone isn't now, capturing the noise. Whereas actually, I know my stuff so well that I can just sit there or stand there at the front of the stage and just talk for 20, 25 minutes
Yeah.
without even thinking about or even recognizing what's on the slide. It's like, next. And also, only putting key ideas onto the screen rather than screens of text that people are
Oh
reading.
my, oh, I hate that.
I know, and I think part of that is there's a self-confidence piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
I loved on Monday lunchtime, I was co-presenting with two other guys. One of them only had about 5 minutes to talk. We had 40 minutes session in total. So I was going to do about 20, 25 minutes. One of the guys was going to do about 10 minutes or so, 10, 12 minutes. And the other guy was going to do about 5 minutes. And so we met at lunchtime. It was the first time we'd all met. We'd had some online chats. And they were like both quite nervous about being on the stage. And they went, "This is your bag." And I went, "Yeah, I love it. Don't worry about it. Okay, I'll run it, and we'll basically over to you, and we'll basically do a little bit of to and fro, some Q&A on the stage, and just run it dynamically." And we chatted afterwards and went, "That was really good to be able to have the session beforehand, the quick chat, to calm the nerves, get an
Mm,
idea about what's going on." And just get out there and talk when you're
mm,
passionate and you know about this stuff. You watch some of these people going up with speaking cards. You're like, you're talking for 10 minutes. What do you need a bunch of speaking cards for?
mm.
But that's because they
Yeah.
don't have that. They're not used to it.
Mm.
And, I love it, as you can tell from these conversations.
Yeah, and I'm the same. I tell you what though, it does make me doesn't make me complacent, that's the wrong word, but what I I feel like if I've got this far by not I'm not winging it or blagging it or anything like that, but I can. Like
Hmm.
if somebody said to me, I want you to go and stand on the stage and talk about doubt and procrastination and self-belief and imposter syndrome, I could do it with no notes,
Yeah.
nothing. And then I think to myself, what if I did actually plan it? Like, how good would it be then? And I feel like there's a
What would
natural,
be different?
yeah, say again.
What would be different?
I would just have a structure. And I think it's the intention. I'm good. I can do this without planning it. I'm not saying
Hmm.
like every podcast episode, every direction of conversation, I've always got like an intention of how it's
Hmm.
going to serve somebody. But I think that I could do that better,
Hmm.
in a sense that making sure they are able to implement what I'm telling them,
Yeah.
because we've all been there. Like you and me, we both love learning. You've got one more master's than me, and that's okay. But but you get in. I love learning, and I will absorb and you know like, I will binge learning. I love it. I love it so much, and I think it's one of my favorite things ever.
Mhm.
Love learning. Um, but what do I actually implement after that? And what I've started doing is if I listen to a podcast episode or I'm listening to a book, at the end of every chapter or every episode, what am I going to take action on?
Mhm.
Because if we don't take action,
We're not
there
learning.
is. We're not. What's the bloody point? But we can't then teach other people. And I delivered a workshop yesterday from my old life, wire workshop. for an old friend who is the director of education for like who teaches people to teach teachers all
Hmm.
over the east of England. She's phenomenal, doing a doctorate. She's just amazing. And we it was really good because I saw then people I was teaching and obviously empowering them, and then they were teaching each other.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, hello. This is the pinnacle. But it's able to get what they've learned and then implement it to the confidence that they can tell somebody else. And
Yes.
inside, like when I'm working with clients, the ones in the membership as well, when they say something I've said, like it was similar to what you're saying, or you sound like Gareth Lock, they say, oh, look, that's a Claire Hillism. Oh, you're Claire Hilling me. And I think, oh, yes. That's what it is. Now, I do it in my training and I'll do it in an in-person event, but do I do it in every single piece of content? Would
Mm.
I be able to do it if I was blagging? Would I be that intentional to say, this is how you're feeling right now? This is what I have experienced of feeling like that or what's going on. I know your fears and limiting beliefs about that, but this is what I know. This is how I know it. This is what it can do for you. This is how you do it.
Yeah.
Like, that like intentional, like intentionality, I think can transform any message.
Yes.
And that's what, so I'm really good at blagging, but I'm going to level up. So I'm going to say, I love speaking and I can talk about it all day, but I'm going to be intentional using that kind of framework to be like,
So
elevate.
yes, I think one of the bits that I love about that sort of environment is getting the questions,
Yeah,
because
I
what I
bet.
teach
Yeah.
is sort of general in nature and specific in application. So communications, decision making, leadership, teamwork, all of this stuff that's just general concepts that people know, it's common sense. And then they go, oh yeah, well, I've got a problem. I've got this thing here, and this is what I've done. And I was like, ah. So what was the perspective? How did you perceive it to happen that way? Had you considered this direction or this language? Or, even when we started right at the start here is the use of admit and,
Yeah.
just shifting little bits of language. And one of the things that was really cool for this conference on Monday is they made use of Slido as an online tool that people could ask questions as they go along. And then we had, so it was 40 minutes of presentation and then 20 minutes of Q&A. And to me, that's the bit where you got the opportunity to be specific and ask and answer a specific question. Because one of the problems with a lot of what we do is people will sit there and go, yeah, I get that, but it doesn't apply to me. Or they'll often find ways of distancing themselves from that, because if they don't want to be vulnerable, they don't want to recognize that they've got that weakness or that failure or that fallibility.
Mm,
That doesn't apply to me. But
yeah.
actually, if you ask a question, then you can target it to their specific bits, and then you can ask a little bit more sort of context around it, and then you can make it real for them. And the benefit to me to be able to do that in an ad hoc manner is it shows you're competent. You're not
Yes.
going to
Yeah.
BS your way out of it or fluff it. It's like, no, this is it. And the same as when you called me out a couple of times is you get this. And that's what this dialogue's about. Conflict's a good thing. It just means we've got a difference in opinion. It doesn't mean we're right or wrong, depending on whichever side of the coin we're on. It just means we've got a different perspective.
Keeping it neutral. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. To give an example, what I've called you out on.
Oh, just now on the
Oh, all right. Yeah.
chat. Yeah, just
I
even
thought you were
even the
talking
dynamic.
about a one-to-one.
Oh
But
no, no, just even in this podcast here. I mean, you called me out loads of times in the one-to-ones. I can't remember any of them, but yeah, absolutely, because that's your job. It's that bit of, no, hang on a minute. Have you thought about it this way around?
Mm,
And that's based on your experience and the sort of the contract we have, the professional social contract is if I say something, I'm sort of engaging with you to cross-check what I'm doing to stretch
mm,
me. Because it's very
mm,
easy to sit inside that comfort zone and go, I know this, I know this, I know this. And you go, why? Why aren't you going any further? And then you've got to dig into it. And that's
mm,
what this is about.
mm. Yeah, and I think that like you moving out of the diving industry is moving into
It's shifting
this
it.
one.
So
Shifting,
it was
yeah, yeah.
about sort of 80, 90% diving and the rest was non-diving. It's what I'm going for now is 75% non-diving, 25% diving, because I've created enough of the systems that are out there that I don't need to work so hard to get that going.
Mm.
It's now got a little bit of a critical mass that's out there. And if the organizations come to me and say, develop some materials, I can, I've got so much knowledge that, and I don't mean it to be arrogant in that, again, in that sense, is I could put together training materials pretty easily, actually. You
Mm.
know, writing thanks to you, writing, 1,000 words a day. Well, it's not what it is, it was 3 pages, but I took it a little bit further. But, it's between 22 and 30 minutes to write 1,000 words.
22. It's 22 minutes, not 25.
I was going to say 20, but that's not quite right. So I sit there, this is the details person that I am. So I write down how long it is and how many words I wrote in that
Yeah,
section.
when we first started working, no, was a couple of months in, and I was like, you got to start writing. You've got to. And you were like, oh, I don't like writing. And I was like, well, if you want to get to the bottom of things, it's got to happen. You want to write. And so you were like, well, I'm not going to write how you're saying, I'm going to type. And then what you do is you put it into AI to get,
Yeah, well, I
yeah, to
stopped
get,
doing that now,
oh,
actually,
you
because I don't
have.
actually, yeah. So because I don't go back and read those, and I thought the summary actually doesn't help. It would do if I was going to go back and review, but I don't. So
Yeah.
I just basically stream of consciousness, get some ideas, and things actually I've noticed recently is this is all about diving. It shouldn't be, not it shouldn't be, but it's this bit of if I want to grow the non-diving stuff under human in the system, my reflections need to be about human in the system, not about the human diver, and thinking about where those
Mm.
bits are going and growing in that sense. So
Yeah, so you need to focus on why you keep going back to. I think I've got an idea. Oh, we keep going back to diving, but I'm not opposed to you working diving, obviously. Like, I listening to this, me telling you how to run your business. It's not that at all. But I just, we were navigating away because it wasn't giving you what you want. And I
yeah.
think sometimes we have to think, well, like, if something's not giving us what we want, why are we still doing it? Well, and we've had that conversation.
Yes.
But yeah, how many days have you been writing for now in a row? Have you still got the tally?
267 this morning.
Hey, well done. 267 days.
Yeah, that's it.
Crazy.
So that, with the exception of probably about 3 or 4 days where it's just been flights and it just hasn't worked out, there's always been a journal entry of basically the 3 gains. What have I gained today? So it is, what did I hope to gain? What did I gain? What will I gain?
I
And
like
so
that.
yeah, so that's from The Gap in the Gain.
Brilliant
Uh,
book.
Indeed.
Oh, Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy. I want them to be my best friends. I'm literally obsessed with them. No,
You're
I
not
want Dan
stalking.
Sullivan to be my granddad. That's what I want. Or my dad. I think he's actually, because I'm 40 nearly. It's like it's gone to that point
Oh,
where now
youngster.
you have to be dad if they're older, not granddad. But yeah, oh my God, just two incredible men
Yeah.
who bring out such amazing qualities in each other. They are
Mhm.
just amazing. Um, so I'm going to start wrapping this up.
Yeah.
And I would like tell everyone where to find you, and then I want to
Yeah.
ask the 10-year question.
Okay. So, being as there's probably very few divers on here,
Apart
the
from
best
Shammer.
place, well, yeah, and she can find me just if you Google Gareth Lock Human Factors, it'll come up as the human diver. But my non-diving stuff, the website's just a holding page at the moment, goes live tomorrow, but that's humaninthesystem.co.uk.
Brilliant.
And it's all about high performance teams, leadership, teamwork, learning from unintended outcomes, creating a psychologically safe environment where people can learn, communicate, fail, develop. And it
Excellent.
doesn't matter what space you're in, it's people are people.
Yeah, love it. Love it. And I mean, you've got a great presence on LinkedIn. So definitely your articles make you think. Definitely.
Another one about chefs, actually, because last week I was at chef school in Ashburton,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and the
Food
links
looks
between
amazing.
it was fantastic. And so disappeared down another rabbit hole.
Yeah.
This bit about chefs and cooks and the difference between the two of them. In effect, broad level, cooks are about following recipes, chefs are about taking expertise and tweaking it. Now, you can't be a chef unless you've developed that core knowledge. And the chefing school, the chefing industry is an apprenticeship model. So actually, they develop their knowledge over time. Although Ashburton runs a 4-month chef course, Chef Academy, it's really immersive. It's 4 months of 8 till 6 every day. Uh,
Oh,
and they go out and they do stuff, and they've produced a couple of MasterChef winners from their teams. But what was really cool was the chefs. We had 2 chefs over the week. Here's the recipe, and this is what I'm going to do. Right, put a bit here, put a bit there, bit of salt, bit of butter, bit of this, bit of that. Well, the recipe says do it this way, but this is how I do it. And it was all about feedback, about what's going on in front of you. How do you know that, say, a custard or a creme anglaise is starting to turn, or the same with a mayonnaise? How do you know that? How do you know that the lamb steak or the shoulder is cooked properly? And it's like you feel it and you're trying to get some feedback. So I'm going to put together a LinkedIn post about what people can learn from the chefing industry. Now, the thing is, to scale chefing, so Michelin starred people, the investment is massive because you've got to grow those baby chefs with lots of experience, and you've got to invest time in them, and then you've got to get it just right. It's got to be repeatable. It's got to have feedback. So you can scale chefing, but it costs you money. But if you go to someone like McDonald's, which is cooks, yeah, you're a hamburger cook. It is about process. Click, 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 click. Quality. And I'm a quality business. I'm not a McDonald's business. And that means that it requires time and, as a consequence, money to invest to get the best out of people. There we go. Thinking
I
differently.
like that. I'm just interested to know, do chefs have to have a qualification to be called a chef? Or can you call
Uh,
yourself a chef if you don't use a recipe?
no, because actually the kitchen hand we had, which was a great bit there, we had somebody did all the hand washing. They referred to us as chef.
Yeah.
So the students in the class were chef.
Just thinking for another client, she should start calling herself a chef then. Because I know how she cooks. So she doesn't follow
Yeah,
recipes. She
yeah.
writes them. She doesn't follow them.
But even then, it's writing them. But it's that bit that says, does it get done exactly the same way? And he said, things like making a creme anglaise with eggs and yolks, or making some creme patisserie cream. And he said, I just throw the stuff in because the eggs could be medium or large. We don't know. You go and speak to a pastry chef, they will weigh out the egg yolk and they'll say, right,
It's
75
science.
grams of
Yeah,
egg yolks.
yeah.
It's precise because it has to be repeatable for what they're dealing with.
Mm,
But it was cool. It was a fantastic experience, and I love that place. I'll be back next year.
amazing. So, what do you know now that you wish knew 10 years ago?
Um, that self-belief is incredibly important, and it's not about ego in a negative sense. So the bit that I've got here is believing in myself first before I try and please other people. That's probably been my biggest takeaway, predominantly thanks to you,
Mm,
of this self-worth piece of feeling that I have to be able to justify my behaviors, my performance, my outlook, get validation from others before I consider being worthy. And that's another one, is the obstacle is the way, is you can't be worthy to somebody else until you're worthy to yourself.
mm. Yeah, seeking validation.
We
Much.
want it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's got to start inside first.
Validate yourself first.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
the thing. So
amazing.
it's been an awesome session. Thank you, Claire.
It's not a session, it's a podcasting.
Wow, you know what I mean? It's an awesome podcast then.
Thanks for being a great advert for my services at the end of the podcast episode. Hannah, clip that. No, thank you, Gareth. It's been brilliant. We've got to do a fake goodbye. I forgot to tell you that bit. Do a fake goodbye, pretend goodbye, and then we'll do a real one once I stop recording. All right. Thanks, Gareth.
Thanks very much. Love being on the podcast, and we'll catch you soon.
Bye.